So we're going for the third one with my fellow MC, Julie Hook, who's going to talk about AI and peace building.
Thank you. And also not on the program, but presenting is Alan Treboy, who works with me at BuildUp. Hi, Alan. Okay, and working with us in this project is everyone listed on this. So Alan and I are presenting, but partners are represented here in the room. So if your name is on the screen, feel free to raise your hand. You can talk to these people about this project as well. Yes, thank you very much. Or stand up. Okay. Yes. Okay, this is a collaborative process, essentially where we're involving peace builders in AI model development.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've discussed a lot is why social media is the way it is, and how, as peace builders, we need to look at social media in order to kind of figure out how that influences, the situations that we are in. And one of the things that we built at BuildUp is this open source social media listening tool called Phoenix. It's actually built for you as peace builders because, currently we know that there are more expensive tools, the likes of Meltwater, Brandwatch, Brand24, that many of us already use. But it's super expensive, especially for small organizations that are really on the ground trying to do research and trying to figure out how social media impacts their societies. So what we did is we actually built this tool that is open source that any organization can actually get access to, and you'll be able to do social media analysis.
Oh, I'm moving the wrong clicker. There we go. And one part of Phoenix as you're building your own models that you might use there is that you might need to use, you might want to create your own text classification model. So while we're using AI Peace Builder collaboration as shorthand, what we're really talking about is the machine learning process of doing text classification models, which is represented by this. If you don't know what a text classification model is essentially a way of taking a large corpus or large amounts of text and adding the right kind of descriptions to them such that you can categorize them in efficient ways. So this project that we're doing had a couple of outputs, and Alan will talk about the first.
All right, so one of the things that we know is we've had a couple of the previous speakers talking about the issue around large language models not understanding the different contexts that we live in, maybe under-resourced languages that you're in regions that don't speak English, or the bigger languages that are really trained on ChatGPT, on the bigger LLMs. And one of the things that we figured at BuildUp is we work in some contexts like in Kenya, in Somalia, in Sudan, and some of these tools don't really work for the languages that are spoken there. So if you're collecting or you're doing social media analysis, not everyone speaks in English, as you know, right? Not everyone speaks in French. So we actually need to build what we call text classification models, and that enables us to actually look at the context of how those words, how those posts on social media are being used to influence societies in one way or another. So these nuanced ways that conversations always happen, especially in local languages. Of course, we know they're missed a lot by the LLMs, but having a way of building a model that understands those local nuances and the local language spoken in that particular context is particularly very important. And that is also part of the Phoenix process.
So we got some funding from the University of Notre Dame, and specifically with partnership with Lisa Shirk's Peace and Polarization Lab, to build essentially two of these open source models from Kenya and Sudan. So building an open source model in Swahili and in Arabic. Another output of the process was essentially like bringing alongside the model classification process was some research questions. And essentially those are twofold. Like, to what extent does peace builders' involvement in this building process affect them, their attitudes, awareness, willingness to use AI? And to what extent does it actually improve the models when you have these content and context-specific efforts developing them? So just out of interest, this is not why these two places were chosen. These were chosen because of like long-lasting partnerships and engagement otherwise. But just as an interesting comparison, these two models are being developed based on content in Kenya and based on content in Sudan. And if we're talking about AI and peace building, it's just interesting to know that Kenya was named the world's top ChatGPT user. Sudan, although there's of course like ways and workarounds around it where ChatGPT is officially banned. So it's like a really different technical, social environment in both places.
So maybe you might be asking yourself, how does this process look like? How do you actually build a custom LLM? What does that process look like? So in the context of Kenya and in Sudan, one of the things that we did is we needed people who work in the context, people who understand digital harms, and people who could actually tell us from a diverse set of backgrounds. So we had folks from government, a couple of the friends in the room, folks from media, folks from civil society, and that's just to bring the voices of different actors that are working in different spaces. So the key thing is we worked together to define a problem statement. So what is the problem that we are trying to solve? And the problem that we were trying to solve in the context for Kenya was polarization. So we built a model that understands polarization in the Kenyan context. In Sudan, it was a little bit different because the people we are working with, because of that participatory nature, they told us the problem is hate speech. So we need to actually build something that looks at hate speech as the problem. So that once we define the problem statement, we were able to collect the data together and then develop some annotation guidelines. So how do you define polarization? How do you define hate speech in those local contexts? And then we were able to kind of have some working definitions and examples and worked with the annotators to just understand that a little bit more and make sure that we are able to annotate on a more consistent manner. Even though in the back of their minds is, every social media post is quite different, right? So the beauty of it is that once you're able to annotate, there is also a disagreement part that you're able to look at. Oh, how are we disagreeing in terms of, is someone saying this is polarized, someone else is saying this is not? How do you kind of look at that level of disagreement? Then go into model testing and go back again and re-annotate, testing, re-annotate, and that brings the efficiency level that we need. Next slide, please. So this is kind of one of the platforms that we are using to do the annotation. And what we would do is present a text that we've collected from social media, and then the annotator, who's now the peace builder and the experts that we have in our room today, they would then say, oh, when I read this, based on the definition that we came up with, this actually is definitely polarizing or not polarizing, and they can be able to say why that particular content is polarizing. Is it because they contain vilification, dehumanization, negative stereotype? And when we did that on a more consistent manner on a huge data set, a model started to emerge that understands those local nuances and trained on that local language. Next. And also, of course, at the end of the day, there are posts that they find no polarization on, and that enables us to also know what are the indicators that the model should know that don't contain polarization. Here is an example which you might think that, this is polarizing content, but actually based on the definition we had, this was not, because we are not tone policing. We really wanted to avoid policing people on the tone that they use on social media, but more or less looking at polarization or affective polarization as the component that we are looking into.
So some initial observations on what I had said was kind of the research output side of things, and this is an ongoing process, so this isn't fully developed, but these are some initial observations just based on the experience so far. So far, sort of across the board for peace builders, the AI hype was real, and this wasn't necessarily expected, but everyone is kind of excited and wanted to get on board with AI right away. The second initial observation that I think was interesting was that annotation was described as a fun process, or at least a positive process across the board. For anyone that has done annotation, it is not necessarily that fun. You're looking at thousands and thousands of rows of spreadsheet data and clicking essentially yes or no on these. But when peace builders are doing this about their own context, as a subject matter that they really care about, there was a lot of moral, political commitment to the process, which also made it fun. And you're doing it alongside this diverse group of your peers and cohort members, which made it interesting. Third, peace builders sort of universally talked about AI in terms of efficiency over reinvention. No one was saying that they were afraid that AI was coming for their jobs. No one was afraid, or no one was saying that peace building was going to fundamentally change, but they talked about their existing work and the areas in which that they thought this could make it more effective or efficient, which also I think speaks to the positive of a process like this that is participatory and that it's getting people kind of under the surface, behind the curtains, seeing how the sausage is made, so some of that hype can be like actualized in real possibilities. 4, there was a lot of concern at the beginning and then excitement at the ending. that peace builders could localize their text classification models. So that was sort of an exciting point. And then a really important point is that the bridges to the model developers and the peace builders were really important. Alan was one of those bridges. Hussam, who is here, is another one of those bridges. So you really did need that kind of mediator or bridge across to be able to have that effective collaboration. A couple of applications? Yes.
So the beauty of this is that we were working with people who are already working in the context. So people in civil society looking at the issue of digital harms and polarization in the context, people in government that are also involved in the issue of hate speech and polarization, people in the media who could do advocacy against, what is happening. And we felt that, working with these people and them understanding the process and learning the process enabled them to actually see the bigger picture around how this model could be used in the future to actually, do research or even to do interventions on the ground.
Yeah, and this is feeding into a couple of specific processes in each of those that you'll hear about in other workshops throughout the time, but we just want to say that this was an interesting project overall. The models will be sort of up and available on Phoenix and open source, so you can use them themselves, and then again, talk to us more about the other research outputs. Thank you.
Thank you so much.